Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav Network. Check out Bleav in Astros with Mike Stanton and Bleav in Texans with Cecil Shorts. A couple of the hundreds of shows in the Bleav Network. Joining me is my co-host, Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism. Between the two of us, later in the show, we look at two heroic Texan comebacks from Sunday's game. Also, the case to fire Bobby Slowik, and we preview the Patriots game. But, Stephen, Rockets preseason came along at just the perfect time. Signed, sad Astros fan.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, it's funny. That's kind of what I thought, Robert, after they lost last week in game 2 of that wild card series. I thought, well, the Texans at the time, they were 3-1. Now they're 4-1. But, the Texans are doing well. The Rockets are about to start. Yeah, we're disappointed the Astros aren't here. But, hey, that's why you should never be a one-dimensional sports fan, because especially if you live in a city like Houston, there's always something going on. So you know what? If the Astros break your heart, you got the Texans. If the Texans break your heart, you got the Rockets. If you got the Rockets break your heart, you got the Cougars, and on down the line. So you're right. The Rockets came back just in time, even though it was just, they played preseason games, but it still means basketball's here.
That's why we do this, Stephen. We're the only ones, I believe, in Houston that have a Houston-centric sports podcast.
Well, certainly the longest running. I think that's without a doubt. 11 years now? We just celebrated?
Yeah, we're starting our 12th year, and there's no generic one. I mean, radio stations, they talk about all this stuff, but Rockets, Astros, Texans-centric podcast, as far as I know, there's no other one quite like this one. And let's talk Rockets, because I want to start with Amen Thompson. I heard the training camp interviews talking about Amen looking stronger, but I wanted to see him on the court. Yes, you can see it. What about that handle? It looks way better. I said Amen should be a starter this year months ago. The rumble among Rockets fans is catching up to me, Stephen. Somehow he's got to play at least 30 minutes a night. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he certainly did look the part, Robert. And I'm really eager to see guys like him, Cam Whitmore coming into another year, how Tari Eason's going to do. But yeah, getting back to Amen, his work ethic, it really doesn't surprise me. And I know that, a lot of players, sure, they work hard. I realize that. But Amen takes it to another level. I think, when the Rockets drafted him, we heard so many things, about how he was driven and, he and his brother and how they played together for hours and hours. So the work ethic is definitely paying off. And I think it will pay. I think it'll translate to results, Robert. You can't really tell by one preseason game. But just from the looks of it, I think we're going to be happy with what we're seeing from Amen Thompson. Still needs to develop some things in his game, but definitely like what we saw in the preseason game.
Not only did Amen look stronger, so did Sengun. And just as important as that, he showed no hesitation on a couple of three-point shots. And wow, does his form look smoother. The whole catch and release is night and day better. Also, Stephen, just as important as making the threes, it's that quick decision-making at the three-point arc that I wanted to see. And at least in game 1, I saw it.
Really, Robert, the question that we're going to ask throughout the season, and we'll certainly find out, will Sengun be able to keep up his defensive play? Because, he's getting better on defense slowly but surely. But, can he continue to do that and shoulder the offensive responsibilities that, the Rockets are certainly counting on him for? As far as the three-point shot, he's definitely getting better with it. He's still, I know there was one instance where he could have taken a three and he passed to Jae'Sean Tate inside, but he made up for it a little bit later by taking one. So, yeah, for the most part, I think he's realizing that when he's got the shot, he should take it and be confident in that. And he did prove that in game 1.
Now to Jalen Green. Jalen was about 80% good, 20% bad. The 80% good was the three-point shot. He was 4 of 9. Everybody knows the efficiency and shooting is what we're desperately needing from Jalen. And I know from a training camp interview that he's worked on his balance going into his shots. And Monday was a very good sign. The 20% bad was that slow start. Stephen, he can't keep looking like he just got up from a nap when the game starts.
No, that's certainly true. And I know that, what did he have? Like 21 points, something like that. And, but again, he's got to learn to play a full game. Just like, so go him, so go the Rockets. The Rockets, prove that they need to be a better second half team, at least from that game. But a lot of that is certainly going to be on Jalen Green and whether he is going to deserve that extension to begin with. And that's going to be a big deal.
It reminds me a little bit, his starts. Do you remember when Tracy McGrady and Yao were playing together, and it just felt like every game they started off like, they had just got off the bus and forgot to, just get ready for the game. And it was just very sluggish early on. And every time Jeff Van Gundy would come out for the post game, he would be asked about it, and he had no answer for what was going on with this team.
Yeah, I do remember that, and that's kind of what we're thinking about now. And just to show you, I'm looking here. In the second quarter, Utah I think trailed by 13 at the break, and Green scored 14 of those 21 points in that second quarter. So definitely spreading the scoring around with him is certainly going to help the Rockets overall, because as we know, in the second half, that's when things kind of caved in.
My only complaint about Reed Sheppard is the three-point shooting. I see it in practice. I saw his college stats. I hear that everybody thinks it's great, but Monday night, he was 0 for 4, and in the Summer League, 5 for 19. So 5 for 23 against NBA competition. And Steven, I don't feel like he's taken a bunch of contested threes. He should be fine, of course, but let me see the goods. Come on. It's like, I hear you're really good when you take your clothes off, but I'm not seeing it.
Oh, that's a great analogy, Robert. I definitely hadn't thought of that. So what you're saying is that 52.1% three-point percentage, it's just luck. It's just all, now in all honesty, I don't have the numbers in front of me of, how many of those were contested. And of course it is college ball, but he did play in an SEC school. So I guess we need a little more of a sample size, but boy, the Rockets really they could benefit so much from him if he could get an outside shot. They desperately need that.
Yeah, well, he supposedly is incredible at it. I have to see it in an actual NBA game, not college, not
summer league, not even summer league. I mean, can you really draw from summer league? I mean, it's all you've got to go on right now. But
we didn't see it there either. That's what I'm saying. We didn't see it there.
No, we didn't. So let's hope it's just an anomaly. But when I saw that stat the first time, Robert, when he was drafted, I'm thinking, well, that's going to shrink considerably in the NBA. That's just it's not going to happen. But even if he could be a decent three-point shooter, boy, would that give the Rockets a boost.
Yeah, he didn't need to shoot 51%. 49% would be fantastic. I mean, that's good.
Yeah. Even 50.1, we'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. Last guy that I wanted to hit on, Cam Whitmore, 17 points in 19 minutes. No surprise there. He was per 36 Cam last year. But Steven Udoka cares about his defense, and you had to love 3 steals and a block shot.
If I'm looking right, Cam only took 8 shots.
He's typically efficient usually, and that's offense is not an issue with Cam. It's that other stuff. The defense.
It's the other stuff you got to develop. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, he made some moves too. He had some poster moves.
Oh yeah.
I think I even saw on the Rockets Twitter feed during the game. I think it said something like, "Cam, chill. It's the preseason." So save some of that, bottle some of that up, Cam, and do it during the regular season when you really need to.
I forget if it was Charles Barkley, but somebody, one of the veteran retired guys used to say, you only got so many leaps in those legs, man.
Yep. So bottle that up, Cam. But it's the other parts of his game that we're really going to have to watch and give you the offense when you need it, but get some other dimensions going, and he's really going to be something.
Those were my 5 takeaways, Steven. Did I miss anything that you wanted to hit on?
Again, it's hard to draw from a preseason game, but I know that, I can see the intensity that this team has. They've talked about in training camp, playoffs or nothing, is basically how the players' mentality is. And it's easy to say that now, and it's going to be a long season. But I just have a feeling that, the Rockets are going to take that next step. They really need to, Robert, because with this young core, we're tired of hearing the rebuild and these guys are young. They've got to start proving it. And they played together, when are they bringing back 15 of 90% of the players that they had last year, they're bringing back. So we don't want to hear any more of the excuses of the rebuild and these guys are young. This is the year they've got to put it together. Yeah, that may seem like a lot of pressure, but that's just what needs to happen. And honestly, I think Ime Udoka can get that out of him.
Yeah, Udoka is not about excuse. He's like, we want the championship this year. If you know that guy, that's the way he thinks. And really the only thing that I thought was Steven Adams that was a little concerning. It was the only real concerning thing is I just don't feel like he's moving quite as well as he should. But it's been 2 years since he played, so you hope it just comes back with time. But that's the one thing you're like, how is this guy going to come back? Because that was major stuff that he went out with. And it's just like, you don't know at this age if a guy's going to be the same guy. And he wasn't a quick guy to begin with.
Well, that's right. Mobility was not his strong suit, being strong inside maybe, but what you hope that you don't need a lot of minutes from Steven Adams, or that's a very bad sign. So what minutes if you can get good quality minutes from him, get the muscle up front that you so desperately need from him, and then the other question, Jock Landale, is he going to have a better year this year? Is he going to be healthy? So those are the questions you've got as far as, being up front and, with Sengun looking like he's coming back very well from that injury. Time will tell. But yeah, you don't want to see a whole lot of minutes per game from Steven Adams or you're in trouble.
Yeah, you said it, Jock Landale. I mean, you have another option, and he looked fantastic the second half of last year, and I think he's coming into the season healthy, unlike last year. So that's good news. And let's go to another center from this one from the Rockets past. Last week, the Rockets lost yet another legend. Dikembe Mutombo passed away. Most Rockets fans remember him being a part of that incredible 22-game win streak and how much fun he was during his time with the Rockets. But Steven, let's not forget, there is probably no championships and no clutch city without Mutombo. His Nuggets pulled off that miracle upset over Seattle, and the Sonics were the 1 seed at the time, and the Rockets kryptonite for a decade. Oh. Seattle was just kryptonite for them. Is there clutch city without Mutombo, Steven?
No, because I remember taking this big, deep breath and exhaling, going, thank God we don't have to play Seattle in the first round, or in that round, because, oh man, yeah, that would have been, I mean, we can sit here and say, what if maybe the Rockets would have pulled off, what they couldn't pull off during that regular season. But yeah, you have to think that without Dikembe Mutombo and the Nuggets winning, things might have been a whole lot different. We wouldn't be talking about clutch city at all if it weren't for that. But I guess would the Rockets have beaten Michael Jordan in the finals if they'd have faced him, if he had been in the league? I guess we'll never know.
And if you think about it, the Rockets might have 2 of the best 3 defensive players of all time with Mutombo and Hakeem, and you can maybe throw Bill Russell as the third guy into that equation as far as all-time great defensive centers or just defensive players.
Yeah, defensive players, certainly. I mean, yeah, it'd be a toss-up with any of them. Russell was sure hard to beat. Man, that guy could play defense like, I didn't get to see him play, just certainly with highlights and everything. But Hakeem and Dikembe certainly more in my time. And, between those 2 guys, yeah, you can't go wrong defensively.
Quick reminder, by the way, look for our Texans live post-game shows right after every game this year. Tom Chavaria and I break it all down. Thursday, we'll have Patriots Insider preview Sunday's game. And in case you missed it, speaking of Hakeem, we'll go right back to him. Yesterday, senior staff writer for The Ringer, Miran Fader, joined me to talk about her new Hakeem Olajuwon biography. Lots of cool Hakeem the Dream knowledge that you likely do not know, even you big-time Dream fans, even if you've lived through it. So go check that interview out. More on that in a little bit, but we want your support. Please support our content by giving us a thumbs up. You can also comment or subscribe, all 3 of them preferably. It's all free up on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. All right, Steven, let's get to the Texans. And how's your Nico Collins prayer circle going? Can we get him back in the next week or 2? You got that?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm making phone calls, Robert, ever since Sunday. We're lining them up. Yeah, come on, Nico, get that hamstring well, because there's no doubt that the offense really hums when Nico is in the game. I mean, you saw the difference. Yeah, they have depth at wide receiver. Stephon Diggs, he did well against his former team. But make no mistake, Robert, and I don't know how many times we've talked about this, Nico Collins is the best in the NFL right now. So, yes, absolutely. Trying to get that. We don't want to rush you back, but the sooner the better, if that makes any sense.
It didn't look good without him, did it? After he left the game, the offense just kind of...
No, it totally just like changed on a dime. And, thank goodness for CJ Stroud and his magic and Stephon Diggs coming. But obviously, for the stretch of the rest of the season, you've got to have Nico Collins healthy if this offense is going to be on full throttle.
Last year, they had those downfield throws with Tank Dell that just hasn't happened this year. I mean, you could say all these teams are playing that umbrella coverage that's keeping everybody in check, all these quarterbacks from having 300-yard games and long throws and stuff like that. But, the Texans have gotten some long throws from Nico. It's just there's been nothing from Tank.
Yeah, boy, can't you imagine just how even more dangerous they'd be with that kind of weapon. And I actually thought that, with the addition of Stephon Diggs, and you had Nico Collins and you had Tank Dell, that at least between Collins and Dell, that could be a 1-2 punch in regard to throwing long downfield. But, it certainly has translated with Collins, just not with Tank Dell.
All right, let's get to another really interesting story with the Texans. And this one's kind of much cooler at this point. Unfortunately, Tom and I didn't know the full Azeez Al-Shaair story in the postgame. We knew he was sick. We knew it was an incredible game from him because he was sick, but didn't know we were witnessing a performance that made Michael Jordan's flu game look like no big deal. An ER visit Saturday, Stephen, he lost 10 pounds. And actually, D'Amico said he told Azeez after the first series of the game that he better clean some things up or he'd take him out. And you remember that, Stephen. First series was not good.
I was just fixing to say, on that first series, he definitely looked shaky. I think it was sometime during the game that I realized he was ill. I don't think I didn't know that at the beginning of the game. But yeah, that first series, it definitely looked like there was something going on. But what a difference. I mean, he came back, and obviously, adrenaline can do some crazy things during a game, Robert. I mean, I've never played professional football, but I have played sports, and I don't think I've ever played with whatever fever he had or whatever flu he had. Now, I have done a radio broadcast with 102 fever. I can tell you that. But that's nothing like dressing up in pads, and getting popped by, having to block offensive linemen and things of that nature. So there's no comparison there. You have to admire guys like that. We talk a lot about Michael Jordan. Let's not forget, for those of you who are old enough to remember the Cotton Bowl in the late 70s, 79, I believe it was, when Joe Montana was quarterback for Notre Dame. They were playing in the Cotton Bowl. It was probably 30-something degrees. Joe Montana had the flu. Notre Dame was down by 22 points in the fourth quarter, and they came back and broke the hearts of every Houston Cougar fan you can imagine by winning that game. So, yeah, it's just it's crazy how some athletes, no matter how sick they may be or in pain they may be, they just turn it on. And that's with Azeez. That certainly happened on Sunday.
Yeah, speaking of that era with the Joe Montana game, that same year there was a show called WKRP in Cincinnati, and I when you said you had a fever, Stephen, I was just wondering if they called you Johnny Fever. Remember him on WKRP?
No, they didn't. And I certainly felt like I was somebody fever. Right? That was. It was a 5-hour broadcast. I was out on location, couldn't even do it from home. So yeah, but again, that's nothing like what these athletes have to do in a game.
There was a very quiet heroic effort Sunday. Dylan Horton, he became the third Houston Texan in history to come back from cancer, joining John Mechie and David Quesenberry. I wonder if this is like an NFL record. I don't know, but I didn't even realize, Stephen, he had 15 steps, just one tackle for Horton, but his Pro Football Focus grade was a really good 70.9.
It's a troubling trend, Robert. I prefer to not set those kind of records, having a team with the most players coming back from cancer or, some type of illness like that. But yeah, you may have something there. It's just good to have him back, on the defensive line. It's just hard to say, because Quisenberry, of course, didn't stay long after he came back. John Mechie has had his struggles. But, you pull for every one of these guys, not just to pull through. And if they're going to come back, you certainly want to pull for him to do well. You're just glad that he's back in the fold.
The Texans are not exactly painting Van Goghs every Sunday, but 28 NFL teams wish they had 4 or more wins, like the Texans. What's crazy is they're 24th in net points. So basically their record should be much worse, especially since they're first in penalties, first in penalty yards, and first in false starts. Either they get rid of the penalties and start winning with wider margins, or Stephen, it's maybe a house of cards and it starts falling apart.
No more proof of that, Robert, than in Sunday's game in the first half. How many penalties did they have in the first half? Zero. How many did they have in the second half? I can't remember the exact number, but it was 7 or 8? It was somewhere around there. And look what happened in the second half. They almost gave the game away. I mean, that tells you right there that you've got to be disciplined when they are mistake-free. They have the talent. When they're not, they still have the talent to get things. Yeah, and here's the difference, Robert. 2 years ago, this team would be 1-4 instead of 4-1 with games like this, maybe even 0-5. So that's the difference, is they are doing just what they need to do to win. But the question is, how long can they keep it up the rest of the season?
Most of the Texans fan base says, hey, Bobby Slowik, get him out of here. He needs to be fired. And you know what, Stephen? I got to agree. Let me make the case for you. Number one, the Texans offense is ranked a pathetic 6th in the NFL in yardage. There are 5 teams better than them, 5 whole teams. Come on, Bobby, get it together. Number two, he can't get the run game going despite having his 3rd and 4th string running backs out there most of the season. Come on, you got the 3rd and 4th stringers out there. Why can't you get the run game going? Number three, he can't stop Laramie Tunsil from committing penalties like other Texans coaches have. I mean, everybody's been able to convince him not to have the penalties. What's wrong with you, Bobby? And then my last one, they've won only 4 of 5 games. And what's even worse, they couldn't even beat the winless, pathetic, terrible Vikings. Undefeated. How was my case, Stephen?
Oh, it's looking great, Robert. I heard you and Tom talking about some of the comments in the shows, and I couldn't help but laugh. And I do have one thing to say to those of you who want Bobby Slowik fired. You ready?
Never underestimate the heart of a champion. Is that
well, the Texans haven't won a championship yet, but wait until the season is over and the Texans, you got to hope that the Texans go deep into the playoffs, because if they do, Bobby Slowik will not be the offensive coordinator next year because somebody else will snap him up as a head coach. So just be patient, Bobby Slowik, anti-Bobby Slowik fans. Pray for the Texans to get at least into the second round, maybe the Super Bowl, and then you won't have to worry about Bobby Slowik ever again.
Yeah. Let's flip to the other side of the football, and I want to ask you this, Stephen. Are you a believer in the Texans defense? And I'm going to throw some numbers at you. They're 4th in the NFL in total yards. They're 17th against the run and 3rd against the pass. Although you got to factor in playing against Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, and Trevor Lawrence. What do you think?
To me, the jury is still out. And again, the pass rush is inconsistent. And you've got, the secondary. I mean, Jimmy Ward can't stay healthy. And you've got depth issues at certain places like linebacker. I mean, Sunday, certainly they played well for the most part. Again, the second half, it kind of caved in a little bit, but then so did the offense. So I think that it can improve from week to week. But yeah, the jury's still out on the defense. I'm not still quite sold on the fact that you can put them as a quote unquote top tier defense.
This week, the defense gets rookie Drake Maye in his very first start. No Jacoby Brissett, unfortunately, because how bad is Jacoby? Oh, it's bad. He's 27th in yards per game, 32nd in yards per pass attempt, 29th in passer rating, and he's got 2 total touchdown passes. But even without Nico and without getting Brissett, this has got to be a double-digit win, Stephen.
Well, didn't we say that about the Jaguars? So again, it boils down to playing mistake-free football, Robert. I don't care how bad the team is. If you're gonna make those kind of mistakes, they're going to hang with you, and they may very well snatch the game from you. Now, I know the Patriots were a different team, but historically, hasn't Jacoby Brissett been a thorn in the Texans' side? I mean, I'm kind of glad he's not in the game. Yes, I know the Patriots, they don't have, he was, of course, came in for Tom Brady. I remember one game when he shut out the Texans, something like 26-0. And yes, I know there was a different Patriots team, but some guys just play better against the Texans. So maybe having Drake Maye in there is even better for the Texans because he's playing his very first game in the NFL.
Yeah, he was beating us with the Patriots, but he also beat us with the Colts too.
Yeah, he beat us with the Colts too. That's right. I was trying to think who else. Yeah, I was with the Colts when he was there. He did the same thing.
If anybody's wondering, I gave Brissett's numbers. Stroud is 4th in yards per game behind Geno Smith, Jordan Love, and Dak Prescott so far. Stroud's 8th in yards per pass attempt, 10th in completion percentage and passer rating. And by the way, D'Amico said that on the Stroud fumble that CJ pulled the ball down instead of making a quick throw. He did it because the receiver ran the wrong route. So I thought that was real interesting, and maybe don't blame that one as much on CJ Stroud. Plus, as we said in the postgame, Blake Fisher's guy bulldozed him or it wouldn't have happened. And Stephen, how about this Stroud stat? He's 10-1 in his last 11 one-score games.
Talk about the magic of CJ Stroud. And let's not forget, he's doing a lot of this on the run, Robert, with the pass protection the way it is. I don't know. Maybe I think you said it. I don't remember if you said this on the last podcast or if we were talking about it off the air, but maybe that's what he needs. He needs to run for his life because he seems to throw better when he's on the run. But that's where you've seen a lot of the CJ Stroud magic is when he's under duress, when he's being rushed. But the guy is just magical. It just, again, you have one of your weapons taken away you still find a way to win. And that is the mark of a great quarterback right there. Yes, the other players have to come through too, but this is where CJ Stroud is at the moment.
Yeah, you and I go back to the Oilers, and it's like we don't complain about close wins.
Well, and listen, Houston NFL teams should know better than to get a big lead on teams from Buffalo. The Texans actually did survive this one, but he just couldn't help but think, oh no, not again. But CJ Stroud wasn't about to let that happen.
The Texans are bringing a couple of their legends home. Tight end Tegan Quitoriano and cornerback Quitoriano Hollman are back. Yeah, legends. And it's going to be Hollman's actually third stint with the Texans, but he only played in games last year. And I assume Quitoriano is back, Stephen, with the Brevin Jordan and British Brooks injuries. If you missed it, Brooks is out for the season now. Quitoriano is probably more a pseudo fullback than a tight end.
Well, I actually thought Quitoriano was going to be out longer than this. And boy, British Brooks, man, that breaks my heart because I was sure hoping, we hadn't seen a lot from him, or not as much as I would have liked, with the season. But yeah, that's sad. What a story he is. He made the team just, against tremendous odds, and now he's out for the season. But yeah, you never know. Maybe Quitoriano Hollman will do something. Maybe Quitoriano will do something. But yeah, chances are you have him back for depth, and that's about it.
Yeah, Quitoriano, he had some injuries. He was kind of banged up, but he was on another practice squad. It might have been Chicago's. So yeah, it wasn't as though they put him on the injured list or something. He was on another practice squad. That's why he's back with the Texans, and they could just, pull him off of the practice squad. You can always do that. Remember, in the NFL, get a guy off another practice squad. Anything else about the Texans that you're thinking about as we go into this game on Sunday against the Patriots and the really kind of hapless offensive Patriots? It's going to be a low-scoring game unless the Texans can actually figure out a way to not screw up some of these offensive possessions like they have been.
Well, I sure would like to see Joe Mixon back in there. I mean, I really want to see, because the running game just hasn't been there. And, he only did one game. He got off to kind of a slow start in the Bears game, but that's all you saw. But if we can just get some of these guys back, let's hope that, Nico Collins can come back. If not this Sunday, certainly the following Sunday. If the Texans could win without him this Sunday, it's even better because you'd have him stronger for the next week, hopefully. That's really it. Just the offensive question marks and the discipline. I mean, overall, they played a more disciplined game on Sunday. But again, the mistakes reared their ugly heads in the second half, and they almost lost the game because of it. Thank God for Kaimi Fairbairn. How many weeks are we going to say that, Robert?
Oh, my goodness. What a game changer. I mean, they were talking on the radio this week, is he the Texans MVP this year? And obviously CJ matters, and Nico has been incredible. Nico, you'd probably say, is the MVP because he plays so many more snaps. But, I mean,
well, Fairbairn, how many games would they have won if Kaimi Fairbairn had not made those kicks? I think that tells it the story right there.
Yeah, well, how many would they have won without Nico being like half the offense most of the time?
Yeah, well, you could just give it to, but you'd be co-MVPs because, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt both of them are lighting it up. But man, it's not just how many kicks Fairbairn is making. These are distance kicks. He had a 61-yarder before that, and what was this? The winning one was, I think, 59 yards.
8 of 9 from 50.
He's 8 of 9 from 50, and even that one. I mean, it was a low line drive. It wasn't the prettiest, but he could have probably made a 65-yarder with that kick.
Oh, it was right down the middle. It's pretty to me.
Yep.
It's 59
yards.
Right
down the middle. It wasn't high, but it was long enough. That's all that matters.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It's not going to be that high typically if you're trying to kick it from 59 yards.
As long as it clears the goalpost, that's all you care about.
All right. Earlier in the show, I mentioned our show yesterday we did with Hakeem Olajuwon biographer Miran Fader. Her Giannis biography was a New York Times bestseller, and I just wanted to play this quick clip, Stephen, from our conversation where she shares one of the many cool stories in her book. This whole idea of Hakeem spelling his name without an H, and then it becomes an H, and you think, oh, he changed his name. That was kind of the story you felt like as a Rockets fan and as an NBA fan. Why was it originally spelled with an H, Miran? And really, it's one of my favorite factoids of the book.
Yeah, I mean, that's another longstanding myth of, the changing it, or it had to do something with, his coming back to Islam. But really, a secretary made a mistake. She printed it wrong, and it just sort of stuck on every single paper. And because when you say it, there's the silent H, it just sounded like Hakeem. And because he was so polite and so humble and so, new to his surroundings, he wasn't going to correct people. But I interviewed a journalist who, Tracy Dodds, who was reporting on him, and he wrote down his name for her with an H on her notebook. And so she went back to her copy editors and basically said, it's Hakeem. And they were like, no, you're wrong, silly woman sports writer. Like, it's Hakeem. And so she was like the only one that knew his true name for a while. So yeah, I thought that was fascinating to discover. And they put it on the back of his uniform, Hakeem.
Great story from the new Hakeem Olajuwon biography. And Stephen, the book is awesome. I finished all 340 pages in 2 days.
Wow. Well, all right. First of all, does she do a podcast, Robert?
No.
If she doesn't, she needs to. Mirren, you need to do a podcast with a voice like yours. Do a podcast. Oh, I'm just saying. You know what's interesting about that story? I remember, I don't remember which game I was watching, but I was watching the Rockets and they kept saying Hakeem Olajuwon. And I'm sitting there going, am I hearing things or is this announcer just goofing it up? I kept listening and kept listening. He kept saying Hakeem Olajuwon. And I'm thinking, okay, when did he change his name to Hakeem instead of Hakeem? I'll never forget that moment because, yeah, that there's been talk about that for so many years is, well, when he first came out, I mean, when he was with U of H or even before he came to U of H, it was Hakeem Olajuwon. And years into his time with the Rockets, all of a sudden it's Hakeem. So, yeah, I'm interested to, read about that. And, Robert, I don't buy a lot of Kindle books, just especially when they first come out, just because they're so expensive. But I think this is one book I'm going to splurge on and buy because I've got to read this book about one of my favorite athletes of all time, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah, we're going to be the toughest critic on any Hakeem book. And, for me to say I loved it, I mean, it means something because she gets it right. She doesn't make any mistakes in there that I heard and I read. And I just thought, it's a tough job to sell somebody on a whole fan base that followed a guy for 20 years. 20 years we followed this guy. We feel like we know everything. We feel like, if you screw something up, we'll be the first to know what you screwed up. And it's just so right. It was so right.
Yeah, so the book, I Bleav, comes out. We're recording this Tuesday, the 8th. So the book is coming out, the 15th of October?
Yes, it should be out next week.
I'm counting the days. I'm definitely going to grab me one.
We're going to get to the Astros offseason conundrums in the next week or two. Trust me. Can
we put it off as long as possible?
Sure,
no,
why not?
Probably not. Probably not.
No, we'll do it. We'll talk about that. And yeah, we haven't jumped ship on the Stros, but speaking of the Astros, today is Enos Cabell's 75th birthday.
Wow. So, boy, that makes me feel old because I watched him play. So yeah, oh boy.
Yeah, I figured let's celebrate by listening back to a couple of minutes of one of our HST classic conversations a few years ago with Enos Cabell. And for those too young to remember Enos, he played 8 seasons for the Astros in the late 70s and early 80s. Was an Astros broadcaster from 91 to 96 and worked in the Astros front office from 2005 as a special assistant to the general manager. I Bleav it's to this day, right, Stephen?
Well, as far as I know, I at least in some capacity, I Bleav he is still with the Astros. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's listen back for a second.
What do you remember about those 1980 playoffs and going up against guys like Pete Rose and Mike Schmidt, a couple of Hall of Fame caliber guys? What was it like to play in that series? Because many Astros fans that remember that know that was one of the great series in baseball history.
Well, we thought we had the best team. If people remember that we didn't have JR for that series either because JR had the stroke and also Cedeno broke his ankle, I think, in the 3rd game. So we really, our 2 best players, we didn't have playing. And we still thought we should have beat them. And we thought if we'd have won, we were going to win the World Series. So we had a really good team. And then after that, the team kind of faltered for a while, and then it came back. But when Bijou and Bagwell got here, it just went straight back. So, it was very trying for one thing, because when I came in 74, 75, we weren't very good. And we got our tails whipped. But then we got good. And we stayed that way for a long time. Hopefully, this team can do that.
I talked to JR just a few months ago, and he just came out with his new book. What was it like to watch him pitch and be there, first row seat to watch J.R. Richard on the mound during that time?
Well, nobody could beat him. He would probably be in the Hall of Fame if he wouldn't have had the stroke. And, I mean, he'd be another one of our players. But he was just 6'9", and big and mean. And, I mean, he had pitches that nobody has these days. I mean, he had a 93, 94-mile-an-hour slider, and it had two different breaks to it, one hard and one like a curveball. And then he had almost 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and he's 6'9". It wasn't pretty.
Yeah, Enos didn't talk about it right there, but he was really close friends with J.R. Richard. And, of course, our J.R. Richard interviews in the archives as well. I got some trivia, some Enos Cabell trivia for you, Stephen. He was traded in 1980, but came back in 1984 for 2 more seasons. Who did the Astros get in the 1980 Enos Cabell trade?
Oh, gosh.
Any idea?
Yeah, you got me on that. I want to say when they got him the first time, I want to say they got him from the Tigers, but yeah, the 1980. I'd almost forgotten that he had come back a second time, just like Joe Morgan did.
The guy they got was a very important pitcher, Bob Knepper.
Oh, that's right. That's how they got Knepper. Yeah, and he certainly was instrumental in the 86 team.
Oh, of course. And baseball analytics guys, they would hate Enos Cabell. He swung at everything. So his career on base.
Did. Wow.
His career on base, 308. That's not good.
yeah, he did. I will never. That's one thing I definitely won't forget is you talk about if they pitched the ball, Enos was going to swing at it. Just imagine what he would have done if he'd have been a better contact hitter. But it's interesting you mentioned Pete Rose just because of the fact that Pete just recently passed away. I know we talked about that, but yeah, Enos Cabell. I mean, again, another guy that I watched a lot as a kid growing up and still maintained some, ties with the Astros long after his playing career was over.
I am far too young to remember. I'm just saying this. I don't know if it's true, but I'm far too young to remember Luis Tiant. He just passed away. You remember Luis Tiant?
I do. I mean, I was a kid when he was pitching. Of course, he pitched for the Red Sox, and he had some nasty stuff. He certainly did. So that's another one that we've lost this week, Luis Tiant.
I was too busy putting the show together, but a lot of people say he has a case for the Hall of Fame. I should have looked up one of those pieces just to have a chance. Do you think he's a Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm a little surprised that he isn't in the Hall of Fame. I think he is one of those that probably should be in. I mean, I'd have to really just sit down and I haven't looked at his numbers in a long time, but the way he threw, it was something to watch. And yeah, I mean, I think you certainly could state a case for him being in the Hall of Fame and not be too far off the mark.
I don't have this in my notes, but I just forgot about it because there's been so much going on, but I got to give little props to the Houston Cougar football team. What a win against TCU. They looked dominant, Stephen, from start to finish. I mean, they just never looked like they were going to lose that game. And against a TCU team on the road, it's impressive.
I think the Cougars just need to start playing teams that are above them because they didn't beat Oklahoma, but they certainly gave them a good run for their money. And then beating TCU, I mean, their 2 best games have been against top teams. I mean, UNLV, a pretty top team too, and they look pretty bad against them. But, the quarterback situation is something they're going to have to figure it out. I mean, is Zeon Christ now going to be the guy since he seemed to engineer a lot of that win? You're going to need more than one game to find out. But, boy, it was great to see because I'm really cheering for Willie Fritz to turn this team around. And so far, it just hadn't looked like it until this past weekend.
Yeah, they figured out, hey, let's have Zeon just make those simple throws, nothing too complicated. Mostly run the football, which I felt like watching them early on. I'm just like, well, that's probably their best chance to win the game is really running the ball more. And yeah, it worked. And hopefully that's kind of what they're going to do from here on out.
Well, and it's obviously, one game and they may have to end up going back to Donovan at some point, but man, what a big win that is. You just hope it can give them some momentum moving forward because this program has just been down too long now. And you're in the Big 12. You certainly want to compete better than they have been.
When the defense is rested, not like they normally have had the chance to be rested this year, they're good. It's a good defense when they're rested.
Well, absolutely. And, again, against a good Oklahoma team, which, of course, going to play the Longhorns in the Red River rivalry. I still want to say Red River Shootout.
I know.
Nobody likes to say that anymore. But, yeah, I mean, they definitely have they've had some ups and downs. But for the most part, you really can't blame the defense for how bad the team has been up to this past weekend.
Well, get in our library, our Houston Sports History Library. You can find more of the interview with Enos Cabell there. Of course, you can find that conversation with Miran Fader, the whole thing in the library, but you don't have to look too far back into our archives for that. It's yesterday. And don't forget, live Texans postgame on Sunday. Me and Tom break it all down. Our insider from the Patriots is coming on with us on Thursday. So tons of stuff coming up, and we're going to keep coming at you. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk again soon.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.